Today we're going to learn how to do a simple walk sequence using our lower body character. We're just going to focus on the legs today, and we're going to be using a pre-rigged character. This is going to be rigged in Advanced Skeleton, but it's just going to be a simple rig for us to use. So let's go ahead and get started. First of all, we're going to make a new file. We're going to go ahead and reference in our rig file. So if we go to our scenes, go to our rig, and open up our lower body character. Now we're bringing our lower body character in with all of its rig components. You can see that it always prefaces with a long name, so we'll go to our reference editor. We'll just change this to rig. And then we're going to go ahead and get started. The first thing I want to do is, because this character was rigged a while back, the knees are a little bit splayed, so I'm just going to pull these knee controls forward. So these are our pull vector controls. They're just going to point the direction of our knee. Now when I start, I want to make sure that I'm in 30 frames a second. I want to go ahead and bracket my time to 40 frames. We're going to animate in blocked poses to start, and we'll need all 40 of those frames. So the way I generally start is I'm just going to move the root downward slightly. I'm going to tilt him forward slightly. And then I usually start with a left foot forward. That's a good transitional point. It's going to be the point at which the left foot is going to receive weight from the back foot. So the left foot's going to be forward. And then we're going to take the right foot and we're just going to move it back. Now you can see that in this rig, it automatically kind of rolls the foot, but it's snapping the leg straight. So if we use our roll component over here, click on it, and then we're just going to middle mouse button until we get a little bit of a bend in that knee. And then we're going to move the rig down just a little bit more so that we get a little bit of a bend in the front knee. Let's go ahead and extend that back foot. So this is the point in which our character is going to be kind of pushing off. We have our feet slightly splayed out. You never want your feet kind of pointing directly straight, but just a little bit of a splay or a rotation outward is going to be good. We want that heel to be touching the ground. And the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to rotate the character slightly. So we're going to rotate the root over the foot just a little bit. And then we're going to select all of our keyable controls and we're going to hit S. Now this is going to be our first frame and it's also going to be our last frame. So let's go ahead and select all of our keyable controls. We're going to right middle mouse button to frame 40 and we're just going to hit S. Now frame 20 is going to be the midpoint of our animation. It's going to be the reverse of this pose. So let's go ahead and start with our root. We'll select our root, and the only thing I'm going to really need to do is I'm just going to select this rotate Z, and you can see it's at about -2 right now, so if I just type 2, I'm going to go ahead and do that. Then I'm going to switch my feet. So I'm going to take my left foot, I'm just going to zero out all the rotations and translations, and then I'm going to move that back till it's about in the same point as the right foot, and I'm going to roll the foot until I get that same type of knee bend. So now that I've done that, I'm just going to do the same thing with the right foot. I'm going to switch it to the point where it's in front by the left foot. So the easiest way to do that is to just go back to frame 0, middle mouse button drag, and you can see that stalls the time. And I'm just going to move this up to the point where it's by the left foot. Now when I do that, it should key, so you might get a little bit of a snap there. I'm going to take the roll and I'm going to turn that to 0, and then I'm going to angle the foot upward in about the same way. So because we've only keyed that one object, we're just going to go ahead and scrub, and you can see it resets it. So we've basically created 2 keys. This is going to be our first key and our second key. If we just play through this, you'll see that it looks like the character is just kind of swapping poses, right? It's just railroad tracking in between. So we need to add a couple of in-between key poses. First thing I want to do is select all of my keyable controls, go to frame 20 and hit S. We want to make sure that while we're blocking, at every main keyframe, we go ahead and key all of our keyable controls. Let's go to frame 10. Now frame 10 is going to be what's called the passing pose. In a walk sequence, the passing pose is where the back foot is dragging past the front foot. It hasn't quite passed it yet, so we'll go ahead and go to frame 10. We'll select the front foot, which in this case is the left foot, and we're just going to zero those out. So we'll just zero out all of our rotations and translations, and then we'll zero out the roll. Okay, the second thing we want to do is we want to select the back foot that is coming forward. We'll zero out the roll, and then we'll go to our side view, and you can again zero out all your rotations and translations. Then we're going to move it back and up, and then we're going to angle it down. Now we're going to angle it down till it's just about 90 degrees. Okay, and you can see that when we do that, we get very, very bent knees. It looks a little awkward. In a walk sequence, your root is always at its highest point when it's over the weight-bearing leg. So let's go ahead and select our root, and we're going to move that upward. Now we don't want to move it so far up that it snaps that leg. You can see that when you move it so far up that that leg snaps. So you want to find a good point in which that knee is just slightly bent. So let's go ahead and just scrub through, and you can see that already our walk sequence is looking a little bit better. So as we did with frame 20, we'll select all of our keyable controls, and we'll just hit S. Now before I move on, I want to do one thing. When your character is walking, the weight of this character is going to shift a little bit. We're going to take the root, and as the character is walking out over a foot, and you have a foot that's directly below the character bearing weight, we're going to rotate the character out, or move the character out just a little bit. In this case, we're going to be translating it on the X direction. So we'll go ahead and translate it out until most of that character's weight is bearing over that foot. Then we're going to rotate the root just a little bit more. So if you just want to, you can just select the channel that it's in. So in this case, it would be the rotate Z. And then we're just going to rotate the Z. So let's find a good number. Let's just say -3. And let's just say 0.5 is the translate. Okay, I'm also going to take this knee control here, and I'm just going to splay that knee out just a little bit. Whoop, that's the joint. Let me select the knee control. There you go. Select that, and I'm just going to splay that knee out just a little bit. This one too. Okay, so we have a good pose here. Let's select all of our keyable controls and hit S. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing that we did at frame 20 by reversing the first frame. We'll just middle mouse button, go to frame 30, and we're just going to hit S. So we just established our key there. This will look a little weird because the character is going to kind of go backwards, but we need to swap those 2 feet. So let's select first our right foot. Actually, let's select our left foot. We'll move that first. So select your left foot. We're going to rotate it down. And then we're going to move it over and up. The reason I did that was because we know that the right foot is just going to be basically planted into the character, so we can just go ahead and zero that out. So here we see the left foot. It's coming forward. Don't worry about the right foot. We'll select our right foot now. We'll go to frame 30, and we're just going to zero out all of our rotations and translations. And we'll do that. Okay, so now we have the correct foot position, but we need to fix the root. And the easiest thing to do is just to figure out what channels you need to reverse in order to give you the opposite pose for this in the root. So in this case, it's going to be your rotate Z. So we're just going to type +3. And then your translate is going to be -0.5 in the X. Okay, so now that we've established our 2 key poses, we're going to go ahead and go back. Well, before we do that, let's select all of our keyable controls. We'll hit S. And then we'll just go back to frame 0 and we'll just play through. And you can see we have a pretty standard block in for a walk sequence. So now what we need to do is go in and add a couple of in-between breakdown poses that allow us to give a little bit more weight to the character. So let's go ahead and select our front foot. We'll go to frame 3, and that front foot is going to be bearing the weight. So what we have is in here, we have both of these feet in a position in which they're sort of helping to support the weight of the character. At frame 3, we're going to complete that transition. So all of the weight now is going to transition onto the front foot, in this case the left foot. So let's just go ahead and select all of our rotations. In this case, select your X rotation, and then we're going to make sure that our foot is planted. So you see here between frame 0 and frame 3, that weight is going to slap down or snap down onto that foot. At the same time, we want to take our back foot, we want to move it forward or back a little bit, and we want to rotate it down. This is going to be moving off onto the toe of the character. So we're actually going to take the roll out of it there, and we're going to rotate this foot down. So let's move our foot forward until we get a little bit of bend in that knee, and we'll just test this out. So you can see now the character is getting a little bit of snap in that knee. Let's fix that. Let's bring this up a little bit more, and let's rotate the foot down. Okay, so we're rotating and moving. And so what we're going to need to do is add one more key in here. Some of that is because, too, we're zeroing out the roll. So you can add just a little bit of roll in it, and you'll see it'll fix most of that problem in the knee. Okay, so once we've done that, then we have to do the opposite pose on frame 23. So let's go to frame 23. We'll select our right foot, and then we're just going to zero those out. Pardon me, not zero all of them out. I just want to zero out the rotation, in this case the X. And then I'm going to do the same thing that I did with my back foot, as I'm just going to rotate it down. And then I'm going to move it upward. Okay, and we just want to make it so that that toe is rolling off onto that toe. All right. So we've got a pretty good approximation there. Okay, and now let's actually take that roll down just a little bit more. There we go. And don't worry, we'll fix all this the little pops and stuff that we have in here. Okay, so now if we go back out, we'll play through, and we'll see our character have a pretty good standard walk. Okay, so we've put a couple of the poses in there, but we haven't gotten any of the extra in there. So let's go ahead now. What we're going to do is we're going to do one more key pose, and that's going to be right here at frame 15. We want to keep this foot, the weight-bearing foot, as it is, but this front foot here, we just want to rotate it down and bring it up a little bit. Just is going to give us a little bit of extra knee flick. You can also bring it forward just a little bit. All right, we'll do the same thing here at frame 35. So we'll take this, we're going to move it forward, rotate it down just a little bit. Okay, and then the next thing I want to do is add one more breakdown pose, and that's the foot kind of kicking back. So as we transition onto this foot, we want to push off. So giving that a little extra flip is going to help our character make a nice path for the ankle to follow. So if we go to frame 26, we'll do the same thing with the back foot. Okay. So don't worry about that little pop there. We'll fix that in just a second. One thing I'm noticing is I don't think the character is moving downward enough. We're not giving enough weight to their root. So the easiest way to do that is once you've established this with your root, go to your graph editor and then click on Translate Y, and you can see that your Translate Y is going to be a nice sine curve here. So we'll move to the point where our character is down. This is like the pose in which the root is bearing the most weight. And we're just going to drag those down just a little bit more, just to give them a little bit more of a bounce. So that's looking a little bit better. Okay, so there's a couple more things that we need to do. We've pretty much done a pretty good block in, but our timing is a little bit off. Our walk is a little bit slow right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of my keyable controls. I'm going to select all of my keys, and then I'm going to collapse it down to about 32 frames, and I'm just going to hit snap. Then I'll bracket my time range to 32, and we'll just go ahead and push play. So you can see now the walk is a little bit more energetic and it feels a little bit nicer. Now you can time that however you want. The math still works out really nicely on frame 32. At this point, all of our keys are happening at the same time. So what we want to do now is we want to add a little bit of overlap, and then we'll go in, we'll refine some of the foot motion. The easiest thing to overlap right now is going to be your root. So we'll select all of your keyable control, or all of the channels for your root, and we're just going to go to curves, pre-infinity cycle, and curves, post-infinity cycle. This allows us to offset the frames without having an issue of popping. So the first thing I want to offset is I want to select the Translate Y, and I'm just going to offset that by 1 frame. That just gives us a little bit of overlap where the character is not moving up and down directly with the foot motion. The next thing I want to do is I want to offset that left and right motion. As your character moves, you want the motion left and right shifting the weight to follow the movement of the feet just a little bit. Now we'll notice that when we select this, and we'll see this on a couple of different items, that our Translate X has kind of a pause in the curve. That's usually because Maya auto tangents everything when you're setting. So I'm going to select the first and the last key, and I'm just going to go up here and I'm going to make those spline. You can see that now it gives you handles, and you can refine the curve to flow into itself one another or a little bit better. You can also refine this middle right here. And then we're just going to select all of our keys for our Translate X, and we're going to move it down 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's go ahead and play that. So you can see now that the character's movement is separated from the feet. Okay, but our rotation is still happening at the same time as our up and down motion. So let's go ahead and go down to our Rotate Z. And you can see we're getting that same little pause. So you're just going to select your keys, and you can adjust the handles so that the curve flows into itself nicely. And then we're going to select all of our keys for Rotate Z, and we're going to move those down 1, 2, 3, 4. So they'll be at the same point as the rotate. So this is nice. I think I can push that down 1 more frame. So there you go. You're getting a little bit of nice overlap between that. And let's just make sure that our first and last frames are the same. We'll go to frame 32, go back to frame 0. Okay, good. We're getting a good loop. Okay, so we're getting a pretty nice walk sequence here. Now we want to refine the foot motion so we're not getting that really fast little flick. So the first thing to do is to go to your back foot. Let's take a look at that. And we're getting a little bit of pop on a couple different things. One of those is the translate forward and backwards. You'll see that that is the translate Z. So if you open up this curve, and we'll just expand our graph editor a little bit so you can see it a little bit nicer. You see you're getting kind of this weird like hump right here. So let's go ahead and move that downward here a little bit. And so that will be a little bit smoother. And then let's go to our rotates. So our rotate X is going to be the point where we see a lot of that flick. Some of that is because we're getting a little bit of extra here, so you can play with the key to make that rotation off a little bit nicer. Okay, and then we want to go to our front foot. This is at frame 0. And we want this to really be a linear key because the character is going to using this to bear weight, and so this motion is going to happen pretty fast. So if you just select your keys and you hit linear and we play through, you'll see that that loop happens a little bit more nicely. Okay, that left foot is also getting a lot of that problem with the translate Z. So or that right foot is. So let's go ahead and click on our translate Z. And let's go ahead and play around with these keys just a little bit. So I'm going to move the first and the last keys up just a little bit. And this is going to be something that you can decide on yours if you like it or not. So we'll just play around with that. So that's looking a little bit better. You see the continuation of that motion. Let's go ahead and turn on our infinity there so we can see it. Okay, so that's looking a little bit better. We're not getting that pop. Let's select our left foot and let's look at the translate Z on that. You can see that we're getting a little bit of a pause right in here. So what I want to do is I want to take that key, I'm going to move that up slightly, and then at frame 19, I'm just going to go ahead and key translate Z, and I'm going to move that down because I want that foot to be extending a little bit further. All right, so we have a pretty good walk sequence here. The last thing I want to do is I want to add a little bit of extra rotation forward and backwards for the root. So when the root lands, I want the character to rotate forward. And then you'll see in this case, it's going to be the rotate X. Now, a lot of times you do that, you bake that into your poses as you're making your key poses. But if you find that you need that later in an animation, you can just go into your rotate X. And then we're just going to take the key that is currently at frame 8. You'll see that it's just a flat line. There's no real animation on it right now. So we'll take the existing key that's already at frame 8. We'll move that back to frame 6. And we're just going to drag that up a little bit. And you'll see what that does is it creates a rotation forward on the root. Okay, we'll do the same thing with the second half of the animation. We'll move that back too, and we'll move that up. So now as our character walks, they're going to get a little bit of bob. And you can accentuate that, and you can even offset that a little bit if you want your character to just have a little bit of a delayed reaction. It just helps to sell the weight of the character a little bit more, and you can make this more extreme depending on how heavy your character is. So you can see now you're getting quite a bit of movement forward. So let's go ahead and reduce that, and I'm going to offset that a couple more frames. Okay, so now we're getting a pretty good look at our character walk, and it's going to be pretty complete. We're still getting a little bit of a pop there on the back, so let me see if I can fix that back foot. That's going to be this foot here, moving into our next pose. So let's just take this pose that's at frame 2, and we're going to move that back to frame 3 so that motion happens a little bit over a longer time. Let's do the same thing with our right foot or our left foot. You can see that's happening over 3 frames, so that looks pretty good. Sometimes when you scale the keys, it messes up the difference between the keys a little bit, so you have to go in and refine. Now that we've completed all that, we have a pretty good walk sequence here. We've got some nice smooth motion. We've got some overlap and weight in our root. So I encourage you to play around with this and kind of make the character your own. Good luck and have fun.